All right, guys, just a little tutorial here, just to get you thinking maybe a little bit differently about how you're going to start yearbook and what you're going to begin with, because instinctively when we start yearbook, one of our first reactions is to create the ladder, get the kids on eDesign, and quickly start cranking out pages so that we can get the pages submitted and get ahead of our deadlines. But I learned a while back from some great people, Miss Morris being one of them, that we don't really need to worry about that quite yet. We've got to treat the beginning stages of this like journalism, and let's collect that information as much as we can in the first few weeks, if not the first month, in order to have enough content to start to develop pages. You know, just to give you a little anecdotal story, I'm sitting here with my staff today, and we're on day 4 of virtual learning. And of course, you know, some of them chime in and ask when we're going to start talking about theme and when we're going to start talking about getting on eDesign. And I said, you know, even relative to theme, especially this year, I want to start collecting content and things that are going on before we start to decide how we're going to frame that content. And then once we collect content, then we can have a more educated way of framing it and developing theme. So with that being said, first things first, the breakdown of 316 pages. You know, Megan said to me once, when you really break the book apart, people pages versus actual content, you've really only got about 150 pages of actual content. To be specifically, we have a 316-page book, and after page 136, that begins people pages, senior ads, and all that other information. So when you realize that you're only filling, in theory, 136 pages, it eases you a little bit and lets you know that you don't have to rush ahead and start making spreads immediately. Secondly, again, a Megan quote, it doesn't matter what your plan is, just have a plan. Everybody's got a different plan, what's going to work for them. I go in there and I'm kind of a chart person. I break things down by content, title, who's working on that content, photographers, who's going to take photographs for it, due dates on it. And then I put over in another column just information and material that's going to be, you know, that might be used in that specific spread as that content comes in. I've already created a PowerPoint slide for this year where as soon as we have an idea, have a concept, we kind of tuck it in that PowerPoint slide, and then we get a rolling list of things that are going on. All right, social media is your friend. You need to have a comprehensive ladder of what's going on at the school. Usually there's an athletic director or administrator, somebody who has that comprehensive content. And if not, that falls on your shoulders, and you just got to figure out where that information is coming from. I just stumbled upon social media and realized that if I start friending all these coaches, then I'll have an easier time finding out not only when things happen, besides going to their websites, but also figuring out what's important to the coaches, which is often what they want to see in the book. It's always better, you know, to interview near the event. Now in these times of COVID, interviewing is taking on a much different look. A lot of interviewing is digital in nature. But that being said, you know, the idea of striking while the iron's hot is interview near the event, and you'll get the better content. I mean, Lord, we can't remember what we had for dinner last night, much less asking some of these kids what went on at a track meet 2 weeks ago. So that's also important with the calendar. Every group, every organization, and every club has a contact. You just got to find out that contact. You know, whether it's trying to get pictures or whether you're trying to get information, somebody has that parent, teacher, coach who is the liaison or the head, not the liaison and the contact to it, but who is also kind of the one who has all the insight and understand what's going on and when it's going on beyond just typical calendars that we have on digitally speaking. Interviews can be redone and retrieved and gotten at a later date, but you can't get the pictures any later. You know, once the events happen, and if you don't have the pictures, then you're done. While it's always good to interview at the time, if you get in a position where you need to interview later, that's fine, but you cannot go back and get that picture. So you got to make sure you get the picture. That is utmost important. And I also realized too that we don't always have to get the pictures, that there's someone out there, a parent, who might be getting pictures as well. A lot of times they're really good. excuse me, remember that everyone has a phone, and most phones take amazing pictures, especially getting to these new versions of Androids and iPhones. So don't put so much pressure on yourself that you've got to be everywhere all the time. You just need to know and figure out who is there and who's taking those pictures. Interesting slide here, face-to-face versus text interviews. I always say face-to-face interviews are better. We do a really cool thing when in a traditional school setting where we'll invite the entire soccer team, for example, down and record an interview, and then you can have just a typical conversation, and it's amazing the amount of content you can get from a 20-minute conversation with the soccer team when they're all sitting around and they start to play off each other and stories start to build upon one another. Now we're at texting. I tell you what, the cool thing about texting interviews is the kids seem to instinctively want to write more, and it's amazing the amount of content that they'll write. Had a student today actually interviewing 5 or 6 people digitally, and she held up the screen of her phone on a Zoom meeting, and she must have scrolled 5 or 6 times single-space text that this person had written back relative to an interview. So sometimes, now we're kind of beholden to that. I'm still toying with the idea of figuring out how some of the staffers might do Zoom interviews and different things like that, because there's a lot to be said for body language and facing someone face-to-face. Never, ever, ever, ever screw up a picture or a senior picture or a senior ad. I learned that the hard way the first couple of years. So as you're working through this thing as a new advisor, you want everything to be good, but honestly, if you stumble a little bit on a spread or a very small club, the creative writing club, for example, I don't think anybody's going to lose major sleep. Obviously, you want to do a great job on everything, but what you never, ever, ever mess up and what you always want to lose sleep over, if it takes that, is those senior pictures and those senior ads. Those cannot be redone. Other than that, I know that was just kind of a quick slideshow, but I just want to kind of end where I began, and that's on this idea of striking while the iron's hot. Whether it's an interview, whether it's getting pictures or something like that, you always want to do it around that event. And then kind of this original idea of take a deep breath, calm down, realize that you've only probably making around 100 pages, maybe a little north of 100 pages of actual content. So don't feel like you've got to jump on eDesign already, start cranking out designs when you don't really have a content for it. I spend really the first 5 to 6 weeks of my yearbook year teaching the kids how to interview, teaching them how to collect content, teaching them how spreads are developed organically from the information that's given. And then we collect that content. Like, you got to save it in a Google Drive. Get some pictures. We've already got cross-country pictures. We've already got softball pictures. Stick those things in a Google Drive. I had some kids interviewing on BLM and Black Lives Matter and potentially doing something on that. They keep asking me, is this going to be a spread or a module? I don't know. Let's just collect the content. I had some other kids interview on another subject matter, and they kind of asked the same question. Hey, is this going to be like a module, or is this going to be a spread? I said, I don't know. Just collect. Let's write down those interviews, and I promise you 4 or 5, 6 weeks from now, we're going to go back to that Google Doc, and there's going to be so much information that we're not going to be able to put it all in the book. So if you do that, I think you'll find that 5, 6 weeks into the whole thing, then you can start cranking out pages at a pretty quick pace, and you'll be much farther ahead than you normally are. I think last year we ended up with something like 50 early days just by following this process. So hope this treats you well. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Hillgrove High School. My name's David Thomas, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can.